How about that fancy new logo there? So we're going to be working in that build. They're talking about finishing it up. We're going to be pouring a little bit of foam on this one and putting the first section of floor down. The sole will be closing up all the bottom. So that's what we're working on.
Well, it's been more than a minute since anything's gotten done on the old boat. Last thing we did, you saw, is we were putting in this foam. And I had to order some more, and then, you know, kind of life happened. But we're going to get back on it now. I'm going to go ahead and fill this foam up right here. If I've got a plan for those foams here, I'm going to kind of fill almost all the way to the back right there. But I'm going to go ahead and get all this foam poured, and then we're going to get ready to start putting this floor down. Just kind of give you an idea. We still got this whole section in here to do. Kind of right in here, I'm going to pour just enough in the bottom. Just kind of hold this up. Pour just enough in the bottom to where we get some insulation. You know, some sound insulation in there. And then this compartment here. Those other compartments, we'll be able to fill those all the way up, and then we're going to come to the back and be able to fill these outside ones right here. But I'm not going to mess with those that has those drains on them right there. So once again, I want to wait until I get all those connections and all that. I'm going to probably just leave those without being filled. And I've said this before, but I hadn't said it in a while. We're going to try and get in here and sand and paint this build to get it totally done. This will be the water supply lines here. So I'm going to try and get this sanded and get it sanded, put some total bilge in there, and that'll be done. All of this has been done. We'll be ready to start putting these decks and all on. This just shows the other side here. You can see this is an open compartment, and this will be the drain for the live release well. That piece of PVC is just barely in there. Just trying to mark my pattern. That'll be the pattern I use when I build it. And we'll go ahead and pour that center compartment. Pour all these other ones with foam, except for these outside ones. We're just going to pour a little bit in there. And then you can see here, I've kind of put a little dam in here. And these are all my foam trimmings and stuff out of the bucket. So I'm going to just use that to help fill. Pour all this with foam, get those center sections done. Start getting ready, but we're about to get back on it, get this thing finished.
I have to say, it does feel pretty good to be back in the boat building. Not business, but in the hobby, in the action. So here we are, we're pouring a little more foam. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this stuff. Still got a little bit more to go. Just a little tip there, what I found is to pour multiple little small layers rather than trying to make one big pour, because what happens there is that you get weight, if it expands too much and you get a lot more that comes over the top. That's just not that's not the best scenario, I don't think. I think you get better coverage and better better adhesion and everything about it. That stuff is really, really sticky, and so you are able to cut the pieces off of it and use those. But a tip there is you want to pour a little bit and let that sit before you pour some more and it expands, because what happens is you'll see up here in that right hand corner later where I pour some foam in there and it just lifts all of it up. So you kind of got to let it get in there and adhere to it and adhere to all the little pieces you use. But it works out pretty good. And here we're just trimming the tops.
All right, something besides pouring foam and cutting foam, which is really exciting stuff. Still got a lot of that to do back there, but I'm going to try and go ahead and we're going to go ahead and take this little section here, this little piece. We got to put some 10 ounce on the bottom of it. We're going to go ahead and do that. Make some thickened epoxy. Bed that down in there. We're going to go ahead and mark out our 1208 glass that goes here along the edges. And you can see these lines. I've been fitting the little braces that go in here that come across here that'll help support the casting deck. So we're going to move up here to the thing. I took the bow eye out, which you can see this is the strong back and all where the bow eye goes. But I'm going to go ahead and try and get this glass. We got 10 ounce that'll go across this back wall here. And then I'm going to put 1208 on the sides, come down. I'm going to try and match it up really good with this edge here. Because this is going to have total bilge in it. This is going to be the anchor locker. So I do want to be able to kind of keep it clean. So that's going to be my next step. You'll see me matching this out, kind of pre-measuring this, laying it out, cutting it. And then we'll wet it out and put it in.
So So this process here will actually be the first bit of the floor going down. This is obviously in the very bow of the boat where the anchor locker is, and that little piece right there, little F7, that's going to be the first piece of the floor that's finalized, or the sole. And you can see here, I take this as 1208. It's a little bit easier to work with than that 1808. And I lay it in there and mark it where it goes. And that little rechargeable, I don't know, trimmer or scissors or whatever, it's worked out really, really well for cutting this fiberglass. You know, I've had that thing for a couple of years and it's still grinding away. So it does really well. You can see just kind of fitting it in there where I want it to go. And I like to put marks and reference marks, so once I have it wet out, I know exactly where it goes. Give you a different little angle here. So we're gonna run through this pretty fast. You can see I just like to cut all the fiberglass, measure it kind of where it fits in there, and then I like to take and spread a piece of plastic on a table and actually wet out the fiberglass on the table. Now, one thing I'm going to experiment with going forward, be anxious to hear if anybody's got any opinions, is should you try and wet it out from the biaxial side, because it has the biaxial cloth on one side and then it has matte cloth on the other. So this time, this 1208, I find it's a little more difficult. It's a little more finicky trying to wet it out from the biaxial side. So next time I'm gonna try and flip it over and on the table wet it out and then put it in place. So all that's gonna be coming here, and this is some 10-ounce cloth, and it is really easy to work with, but it's a little bit fragile when you're used to dealing with that 1808 and even that 1208. It's just a little bit fragile, but it is very forgiving. It'll stretch and move and whatnot. So you can see there the foam in that very front compartment, and I've also taken in here, you'll see me come in here right there with some sandpaper and any of that epoxy and all that's been there for a while that is kind of slick. I just go in there and rough it up pretty good. All I'm doing here is I've got some neat epoxy, which is this is a 2-to-1 epoxy, which is a slow hardener. So on this day that I'm working, even though I have long sleeves on, you know, it's probably in the 80s, and this stuff gives you plenty of time to work. You'll also see me right here, I'm taking some thickened epoxy, which is just epoxy mixed with Cabasil. And in all that weave of that fiberglass that's been there, I kind of put some of that thickened epoxy in there, right, like you can see it right there, and I just kind of spread it out, so when we put that cloth on there, that cloth is a little bit too stiff to sit down flush and flat in all that weave. So that thickened epoxy just kind of helps fill that gap and gives it something to kind of stick to. And because it's a little more dense, it'll kick off a little bit faster than that regular epoxy. And you can see here I've just got that same thickened epoxy, and I'm filling that void all the way around that little floor piece. If you didn't catch it, I put some thickened epoxy on the stringers themselves. So this thing adheres to the stringer, and then, you know, we packed it full of epoxy, thickened epoxy. And we're gonna come back on top of that and put down some 1208. Once again, because this is gonna be an anchor locker, oh, there's a little buddy, I left that in there just so y'all could see that. So because this is an anchor locker, I'm gonna be putting in 1208 in the bottom, just so that it's a little bit thicker in case, you know, you don't intend to be dropping anchors in there, but just in case it happens, you know, you got a little bit more glass there before you get to wood. So this process is pretty straightforward. This is the first epoxy or first glass work I've done, and man, it feels like 2 years, but it's probably been a good year. And just, you know, right back on the horse, so to speak. I can say this: that's some cheap rollers from an online store, and they have a little bit too much nap to them for what I'm doing. And once they start getting that epoxy starts kicking a little bit, they actually start pulling on the fiberglass a little bit. So I'm becoming more and more a fan of those foam rollers. They don't hold as much epoxy, but when you're wetting it out beforehand, it seems to work a little better. So all I'm doing, just one little step at a time. You know, we're gonna tackle this little bow section here, start putting that floor down, figuring out how we're gonna deal with all these drains, and hopefully get this thing finished up pretty soon. remember I was talking about earlier about how I put that thickened epoxy right here. You can kind of see it moving around a little bit, you know, so you don't put a whole lot of pressure on that little fin roller, but just a little bit there. And there's also some tricks where you're dealing with that fin roller down in where you have an arch, or you pulled a fillet right there. Is if you try and push away from the fillet, it'll actually pull the glass up, so you almost have to roll into that corner a little bit so that it seats better. Just a little tip there. And then all I'm doing now is just kind of running over it again, trying to pop out all the bubbles, spread out any still wet out epoxy and whatnot. So just making sure it's got good contact.
Well, there we go. Ran through that on time lapse there pretty fast. And as you can see, here's the finished product. You saw me, I was having to kind of work on this edge here a little bit. I cut it a little bit long. Let me see if maybe you can see it. It's got a few of those little edges right there. I could get in there and try and cut that with a blade, which is kind of what I did here on the top. You saw I had to, when it's green like this, it's only been a day with that slow hardening. You can just take a razor knife and just cut right through that, especially that 10 ounce. But all in all, it looks pretty good. We're gonna, now I'm gonna work on trying to put these little stiffeners in here that go from here to here. You'll see that process as well. Make me a little bracket here so I can clamp them to them, so make it a little easier. So one step closer, having that one finished. And then I may try and start putting this floor in here as well. I know that looks like hell, but I need some room for that hose to be able to leave that hose in there, and you'll see the hole and all that. I'll talk about that later, but where that hose is gonna come out, I'm gonna create an epoxy sleeve for that to go through. So you'll see that coming up. We're gonna tackle this right now and put these two stiffeners in there while it still hadn't cured all the way.